John Snivelling, the Deputy Editor, is with me here, and joining us from Nottingham, Alistair Campbell, in a moment. John Snivelling, thanks very much for coming in. Your paper wrote, and you restate today, that Ralph Miliband, who fought for this country, his country, in the Second World War, hated Britain. How can you possibly claim that?
I think it's very simple. We examined Ralph Miliband's views as they were put forward in his writings, his diaries, his books, his speeches, and those views conveyed an impression of what he thought about Britain, which was very antipathetic to the views and values of an awful lot of British people. We thought it was reasonable to highlight those views in a piece in the paper. What
do you mean antipathetic? I mean, you said that he hated Britain. He had an evil legacy. He was a man who served in the Navy, who couldn't join up to the Navy fast enough, who offered his life, who raised his sons here, was evil.
We didn't say he was evil.
Legacy.
I'm sure his service in the Navy was absolutely creditable, and we've not sought to question that or to doubt that in any way. What we've done is examined his views as he stated them.
What did he say that showed he hated Britain?
Ralph Miliband wasn't a private individual. He was a very public man. He was an academic, a political activist, an author. Ralph Miliband's views were spread widely. His views on British institutions, from our schools to our royal family to our military to our universities to the church to our great newspapers.
He never said he hated any of that. He never said he hated Britain.
What he said was that he felt that all of those things were bad aspects, were unfortunate aspects of British life.
And that meant he hated Britain.
If you take those things together and you combine them with his espousing of a Marxist ideology, that, in our view, represented someone who hated British values.
Analysing British politics is not hating your country, surely.
We felt, and we think we produced evidence to support it, that he hated British values, and that his views on many areas were antipathetic to British values. And if you go beyond the views that he had put forward in those writings that I've mentioned, there's no question that his political point of view was as a...
What are the values he hated then? I mean, you can have disdain for a lot of things, you can question a lot of things. Surely that is the free speech that your paper so...
Anyone's right to question things.
Then?
If you take together his views as put forward on all of those institutions, cumulatively they represented a substantial dislike of those institutions and disapproval of them. Furthermore, his perspective politically was very much that of a Marxist. He was a supporter of Marxist ideology. He was a supporter of the Marxist ideology which was being used to run governments in other parts of the continent and other parts of Europe, which was responsible for an awful lot of terrible, terrible things, including millions and millions of deaths.
So, was the point of this article that your paper implies now that Ed Miliband hates Britain and that he is a rabid Marxist or a communist?
It certainly was not the point of our article to say that Ed Miliband hates Britain. The point of the article was very straightforward. Ed Miliband seeks to be Prime Minister of this country. He's made many speeches over the 3 years since he became Labour leader. And in many of those speeches, he refers to the story of his parents. It's an important part of understanding who Ed Miliband is the backstory of his refugee, of his immigrant parents, and the difficulties they had when they came here, and the values that they stood for, and how those values shaped him when he was a young man, when he was growing up, just as they shaped his brother. So if you're to understand Ed Miliband, who has told us that he wants to bring back socialism to modern Britain, then you need to understand the values that shaped him.
And parents are important. I'm wondering if the current Viscount Rothermere, whose family owns your paper, is tainted by the article that his great-grandfather wrote in 1934 entitled "Hurrah for the Black Shirts" in praise of British fascists.
I don't think so, and most importantly, I don't think that I don't think it's relevant to bring up a piece from 80 years ago that was written by a member of the Rothermere family.
Let's go to Alistair Campbell, who's just joined us from Nottingham. Alistair Campbell, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. And I mean, I thought this was going to be a debate, not a sort of pathetic ramble from John Snivelling, reading out the lines written for him by Paul Dacre. Can I say, first of all, Emily, you said that the Mail is a formidable opponent. The Mail is not a formidable opponent because it's run by a bully and a coward, and like most cowards, is a hypocrite as well. Paul Dacre hasn't got the guts himself to come on this programme and defend something which I know John Stiefel believes is not defensible. And when he talks about Rothermere and what his relatives wrote about Hitler, the sole bit that they've relied upon for this piece is something that Ed Miliband's dad wrote when in his diary when he was 17. And what you've got to understand about the Daily Mail, it is the worst of British values posing as the best. And when Ed Miliband went out today, he went out and demanded a right of reply and spoke as he did today. He did that, and I'm glad that David Cameron and Nick Clegg have supported him in what he did. He did it because he actually believes in genuine political debate and genuine freedom of speech. These people do not believe in genuine debate. If you do not conform to Paul Dacre's narrow, twisted view of the world, as all of his employees like Stiefel have to do, you get done in. And all I say to all the politicians in Britain, once you accept you're dealing with a bully and a coward, you have absolutely nothing to fear from them.
John Stiefel, you can start where you want. Bully, coward, with the worst kind of values.
You use those words quoting Alistair, bully, coward. Alistair
I'm not a coward.
Alistair
I'm
would
not a
know.
coward, Mr. Stiefel.
Where's
Paul Dacre tonight, and why have you been put up?
Alistair, perhaps you'd let me answer you.
Where's Paul Dacre?
Perhaps you'd let me answer you.
Just let him speak. John Stiefel.
The reality, Alistair, is that Ed Miliband puts himself forward to be Prime Minister of this country. He puts himself forward on a socialist platform. He makes very clear that the values he grew up with were the values of his parents, and they have shaped him as a man.
His dad wouldn't support his views. He said that in his speech the other day. He said his dad wouldn't support some of his views today.
There are many of his views that his father would have supported, and indeed, as we know from Damien Bride's book last week, his decision to stand against his brother had much to do with following through on his father's legacy.
That does not mean. Do you believe, Mr. Stiefel, do you, not Paul Dacre, who's told you what to say tonight, do you believe that Ed Miliband's dad hated Britain, and do you personally think it was justified to use a picture of Ralph Miliband's grave in your coverage?
Well, first of all,
answer the question, yes or no. Do you believe that?
As I've said to you, Alistair, our piece was based on an examination of Ralph Miliband's right.
Do you support that headline?
Alistair,
did Ralph Miliband hate Britain?
If you'd allow me to finish.
John Stiefel, those two specific points. The headline said, the man who hated Britain, you had a picture of a gravestone with the words, grave socialist. Do you defend those?
Let me answer this. First of all, on the headline, it's a well-established principle of all journalism, which Alistair may remember from the distant days when he was part of journalism, that the headline and the piece should be read in conjunction with each other. If you read that headline in conjunction with the piece, which quotes extensively from Ralph Miliband,
you're not defending the headline, are you?
It's justified. I'm completely defending the headline.
You're embarrassed by Dacre.
Wrong.
You and your colleagues are embarrassed by Dacre. Rothermere's looking at you to be his successor, and that's why you're wriggling now.
I don't resile from the headline for one moment. It's entirely justified. It's entirely appropriate for the piece, and that's why in the paper this morning we made clear we didn't apologise.
Well, you've been very reasonable, so I hope you get the job when he goes.
You asked me a question about the picture of the gravestone. That did not appear in the paper.
Do you defend it? It was online. You're the biggest news website in the world.
It did not
appear. Do you defend the picture?
Let him answer.
Let me finish. It did not appear in the paper.
Do you defend its use online?
If you'd let me get a word
out,
Alistair. It did not appear in the paper.
Right, the picture online was a picture of a tombstone that said grave socialist.
Indeed, it appeared on our website.
Do you defend that?
It appeared on our website. It may very well be that the publication of that picture on their website was an error of judgment. As a matter of fact, when Ed Miliband made a complaint about that on Saturday evening, in fact he spoke to me personally. I personally arranged for that picture to be removed from online.
So why do you agree it was an error of judgment?
I think using that picture was an error of judgment.
Right.
Well, that's why we didn't use it in the paper.
Do you justify that headline?
Absolutely.
Did Ralph Miliband hate Britain?
I think that headline is entirely justified.
Did Ralph Miliband hate Britain? Having fought in the war for Britain, did Ralph Miliband hate Britain, yes or no?
Ralph Miliband's values, as set out in that piece...
You don't want to say yes, do you? You don't support your editor.
As Ralph Miliband's values set out in that piece made clear, his views were antipathetic to many British people's views, to many of the institutions of this country.
You spoke to Ed Miliband. Did Paul Dacre speak to Ed Miliband as well on Saturday?
He's up on his estate hunting and shooting and
just let John answer.
I spoke to Ed Miliband on Saturday.
And what did you say to him when he expressed his disdain for that article?
I listened to what he had to say, said I didn't agree with him, but said we would consider his request for a right of reply, which we granted him in full in Tuesday's paper.
And did you defend the headline that you had originally put when you spoke to him on the phone?
It wasn't that kind of conversation.
No is the answer to that.
It wasn't that kind of conversation, Alistair. You weren't listening in, I presume.
No, I wasn't, but I kind of have a fair idea what went on.
The conversation was Ed Miliband raising his complaints, me listening to them calmly, considering his request for a right of reply, discussing that with colleagues, and then granting that request.
And tomorrow you're publishing 4 pages of character assassination of Ed Miliband because Dacre, who you know is losing the plot and Rothermere knows is losing the plot, cannot bring himself actually to accept that he's made a terrible mistake, that your newspaper readers, who kind of go along with the very commercial success that you've got, actually now will begin to see what I've known for a very long time, that you are the worst of British values posing as the best. And Paul Dacre is a poison in our national life, and I'm glad that at last we're debating it.
Right.
And I hope next time that he has the guts to come and defend himself.
Two things. First of all, in relation to what we're publishing tomorrow, there is no character assassination of anybody tomorrow. There is a news story on what's happened today. There's a selection of quotes from people who have been speaking on the media today, and there is a background feature about what was happening under the Stalinist regime in Russia during the 40s and 50s. That is called factual reporting. And on the, Alistair, I bow to nobody in my reverence for your expertise on the matter of spreading poison. It's something you've been doing since the early 1990s. But
Alistair Campbell, just address that point, because a lot of people will say it's a bit rich. This is the man from the Mirror. This is the man who knows about character assassinations. You must know what it's like to play politics with newspapers.
No, because I've just been at the Tory party conference, and you'll find a lot of Tories up there who will remember that when I was a journalist on the Daily Mirror, I respected politics and I respected politicians. And when I worked for the Labour government and the Labour Party, we had to put up with lies from people like Dacre and Stapel day after day after day. One of the things I argued about with Tony Blair was when we used to publish a daily rebuttal of the lies and the smears called Mail Watch, and Tony was got at by some of our ministers, and we stopped it. And I hope that Ed Miliband goes back to it, because the public need to know the truth. The real spin doctors are the journalists. The real poison comes from people like Dacre. He's a coward. He's a bully. He doesn't have the guts to come and defend himself against anybody. And the sooner he is gone from British public life,
you are defending everything that your paper has published on this subject so far.
He doesn't believe it, though.
I'm defending precisely what we published. Alistair has no idea what I believe. I defend it completely.
John, I know you're in line for the job.
And one final point, Alistair. The idea that you, as Tony Blair's spin doctor, respected politics is utterly laughable.
John Stifel, Alistair Campbell, thank you both very much. I'm sorry we've run out of